There's a TikTok trend right now where essentially you post a picture and it's somebody saying, "You're so funny," and you reply with, like, "Thanks, XYZ." And it's typically some kind of trauma or deep lore. Well, earlier this week, I made one of my own, and I will put it on screen somewhere right here. But essentially, what I said is, "You're so funny. Thanks. It's because I found out my dad wasn't my dad on 23andMe." And obviously, I had a lot of follow up to that. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to address that in a TikTok or if I wanted to do so on YouTube and port pieces of the YouTube video back and forth. And if somebody wants to watch the full story, they can hop on over to this YouTube and I will talk about how I use 23andMe to put together the pieces that my dad was not my dad. And this is when I talk about all of this, this is in no disparaging way to anybody that is involved. It is simply my story to tell. It is my life that I have lived, and I want to talk about it because I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's had something wild like this happen to them. And if I am, then I would be shocked and appalled with how things go down in society and things like that. Anyway, let's get into the story about how I figured out that my dad was not my dad through 23andMe, because there's a much larger story involved than just that. The events that I'm going to tell, I'm going to try to tell in chronological order. So hold this with you for a second. Firstly, I was in a troubled teen industry school, and I want to talk a lot more about that. And I've been starting to open up about that on my channel and my pages. But I was getting access to an email, and people were emailing me and getting my email address and speaking to me. I got an email from my younger brother. Now I know that's who it was from, saying essentially that they are related and that my parents are keeping this from me, like all this stuff. And it was like the most wild email I had ever received. And I'm gonna be so real and so honest with you guys. I've never put this out there in a timeline, with the exception of therapy. So yeah, I emailed them back like, "I don't know, F off. Like, I don't know who you are. Like, what are you even talking about?" And then some years later, I was contacted on Facebook by some people, um, claiming similar things. And it was at this point I asked my one of my parents, I'll just say my parents, and they said, "Oh no, that's not true." Um, and I kind of took it at value. They're like, "That's weird that people are contacting you like that." And I was like, "That is very weird." But I started kind of putting things together in my head, and things kind of all started to lay out for me. I grew up, I have 3 siblings. I grew up with one of them, and I have two that are also my dad's children. And the sister I grew up with in a argument called me her half sister. And it was at this point that what is her parents had divorced, and she now was getting like unfiltered information, and she was trying to use that to hurt me. It was like something like, "You're just my half sister, like why do I care?" And I was like, "That's really weird to say to your sister." And I think I was in so much denial. I had an instance where somebody came into my place of employment and they said, "You're so and so's kid, aren't you? You look just like so and so. You're so and so's kid." And I'm like, "No, like that is not my dad's name." And again, I'm at work, and it's super awkward, and they're adamant that they know something, or that, you know what I mean? And like there's somebody else at the party that's like telling them to stop. And so I take that and I'm like, that's bizarre. That's strange. But really, I think I was just in denial. And when I talk about all of this, I want you guys to understand as well that I experienced a lot of trauma with the person that I thought was my dad. Um, a lot of abuse, a lot of bad things happened to me because of them being in my life. I will not use this video to go into the full details of that, but it was extremely traumatic. And in some ways, when I've been asked by therapists to talk about like my childhood, the only thing I really have that's close enough in comparison in some ways to how I was treated specifically by him uh, is a child called It. And when I read that book as a child, I was like, oh, oh, wait. So my childhood with him wasn't great. And it's not like I was holding on to that, but I think I was holding on to something that was mine and that felt stable. And I was just starting my young adult life and things like that. And then I went and I did 23andMe. I was provided a free test through 23andMe for doing a kind of like a research program. But I basically got all the features of the 23andMe, which was really cool and it was really great. But what I started to put together, and it was in a way that I could no longer ignore, like it didn't have like my dad directly on 23andMe or anything like that, but last names started to match up while there was no last names from my who I thought was my dad, or other last names within his family, within my family tree, but there were multiple with the same last name as the people that were contacting me. And it was splitting in a way that it would have, I think what I was to understand, it was like a paternal thing. And I started really cooking it then. And I contacted one of the people who messaged me, which is my real biological father, and was like, why did you reach out to tell me this? Because it was like up until this point, I did not even contact them back because I was so weirded out by it. But I did message and I was like, well, like, what grounds are you saying all of this on? And they explained their side of the story to me. And I explained how I got to that point and how I felt comfortable messaging back, and asked if they knew like these other people that were on the family tree with the same last name. And that was the conversation we had. Um, and then I had a conversation with my other parent, who at this point I'm living pretty far away and I don't know how else to address this. And so I just text and ask, which is like, I understand from their perspective, like not something that you want to receive. But then it was all confirmed to me, and there's a lot more involved in that decision, but that's the main story of that's the very plain story of how I use 23andMe to discover my family lineage. I have some contact with my siblings from that side. I would like to have more contact with that side of the family in general, but I'm very shy. I'm very apprehensive, and it all feels strange and almost make believe. Um, and it's something I will probably struggle with, like the foundations of trust for life as a result. So if you're a parent and you're thinking about doing this to keep things easier, I promise you that it doesn't, that eventually your child's going to have to find out, and they're going to want answers from you. And there's so many things growing up too. I know now that my dad and sister are both diabetic, and then there was little things growing up, and I kind of put it all together now. My mom was extremely concerned about diabetes and having me regularly checked for diabetes, and would constantly just reference, which wasn't a lie, that my dad had a history of diabetes. And their whole family has a history of diabetes. Can you please check this? Can you please check that? And so I was checked multiple times as a child. I would regularly, for every checkup, have to go get all of that checked. All of it was fine. And I thought it was just my mom being concerned because that's what was going on with my dad. And it was, but in a whole different way. And when I dissect things like that and I dissect the amount of people that probably knew before I did, I'm extremely hurt. I've talked about my grief journey here online quite a bit about my Nana who passed away. And it hurts me very badly to know that the person who was the brightest star in your life, like the most important person to you, also knew this information, uh, probably thought it was the best choice of actions, and I don't blame anyone for that, but obviously knew. And as a child, I always felt like, in a way, there was a favorment in the household towards my younger sister. But when I went to my grandmother's house, that didn't exist. And it almost seemed like I was favored and babied and doted upon. And I've asked my mom later on if this is why, and they kind of said yes. And so I wonder how much other members of the family knew, because when we had like the whole family in town right before she passed away, I had some of them say things to me like, I'm so proud of you. It's a wonder, you turned out so level-headed with everything that you had going on. And there's so many things that like go through my head where I'm trying to pull what they mean by that. But it makes me wonder every day if these people also knew, like how many people knew and was just told to like play it chill. That's what I think hurts me the most, is being lied to, by literally everyone. And so it's come to a point where I would like to have some sort of relationship. I don't know what that looks like. I don't think anybody would or could understand what that relationship would look like until it transpires. I think I have not so many things in common with my family, and I don't know if it's because I was raised differently, or the things that I've gone through, or if it's because truly I don't know them, they don't know me, and so there's a major chance that it's just because we don't know each other, and it's not anyone's fault. It just simply is the way it is. But this has had me feeling permanently alienated from either side of my family. I don't feel like I am considered a full sibling or loved and embraced in the same way, that I would embrace a sibling, or that I have. And I'm starting to get like a little bit choked up. It's been like a rough, long journey. And like through that, I experienced, like I said, I was not in the best household situation because of the person who raised me. They legally adopted me. They are on my birth certificate. I don't know if there's a way to change that, but they are on my birth certificate until I literally am in the ground. Um, so it follows me lifelong, even though that's not my dad. And to what I'm to understand, that's legally changed within the courts. And you, as an adoptee, because my dad adopted me, all of that's kind of closed, and so I only get kind of secondhand answers. I've tried to contact different legal things to try to have some closure or understand from like an unbiased point of view exactly what this all meant for me and why. But that's I haven't gotten that far. I am just taking it one day at a time. I fear sometimes that I'm taking it too slow and that by the time I realize that I'm ready to reconcile it will be too late. But I simply don't know what to do with myself, and this has turned into a video where I'm just talking so candidly about what something like this is like. And it's extremely hard to get therapy for too, because it's like I go to therapy and I don't know how else to explain it to people. And then you have to explain like your contact with every member of your family. And I'm like, just to keep things simple, I'm like, have you seen the Maury show? I've said that to multiple therapists. I'm like, have you seen the Maury show? And they're like, yes. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you a very similar story. Just keep that show in the back of your head, and I'm going to tell you my lore. And that feels awful to do. It's part of the reason why I'm not in therapy right now, because my therapist retired and I don't want to go through explaining all of it again. I'm explaining it all to you guys, but it's something that's so weird and hard, and it's something that's like when you're asked like how many siblings you have, it's you're trying to figure out like what's the answer that you should give somebody, like just the quick answer, which is like three. Or if you want to like trauma dump and be like, oh, I have like, it's kind of like messy, but I have like three siblings. um it, or when people and they're like, well, did you always so you grow up with that many siblings? Or like there's follow-up questions a lot of the times that I can't answer or I don't want to answer. I've met my dad's kids, my siblings, once, and I would like to do it again. I'd like to say that my move to the opposite side of the country was not a way for me to create space for myself from this, but in many ways, I think that it was. Uh, it's a lot to go through, and it's a lot to go through in a small town, and I just needed a fresh start. We've gone through so many aspects of this, but I was asked multiple times, like, "Hey, are you okay?" Or like, "How does this happen? Like, what's the story time?" And that's the story time. I hope everybody understands what I'm trying to say. I love everybody involved in their own way, and I just continue to work on myself. I've had family members like reach out, like, "Hey, I've seen you talk about this or this on your TikTok," and not necessarily anything bad or that they're upset, but I am just sharing my story. I never share names. I try to keep it as vague as possible when I'm talking about things like this. I try to keep respect to the people I'm talking about and just tell my story because I feel like a shucking up can of soda. And there's been so much that I haven't been able to talk about, that I have a small platform to do so. And so it's extremely freeing to say things and to have people also reciprocate that they have had similar situations. I found people in similar situations to myself. And so that's extremely comforting. But I'm going to wrap it up. If you guys would like to know more about this story or other stories of my life, subscribe, and I will see you later. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.